Okay, with 7 o'clock, we have a quorum. And with that, let me just double check with a couple of members to make sure I'm going to be able to hear them as they've just come in. Dave Passios,
I'm here.
Evan Waters,
Present.
Heather Sroka.
Present.
Thank you. All right. Good evening. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. And this meeting of the Finance Committee is being conducted remotely. The town of Lunenburg, in response to COVID-19, is currently following the guidance from the Lunenburg Board of Health, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and the CDC regarding the virus and steps communities can take to prevent the spread. All public meetings are being conducted remotely. We will have public comment at the beginning and at the end of the meeting. And access to the Zoom meeting can be obtained through the agenda on the town's website. And any votes that we take will be taken by roll call. I'm not expecting that there will be anything to vote on tonight, but you never know. So with that, the only announcement I have is that I just wanted to let folks know that I did finally, just so that you would stop teasing me about it, I did formally notify the town manager, the chair of the Finance Committee Recommendation Committee, and the vice chair of this committee that I will not be trying to re-up in July. So it would be really helpful if you know somebody who might want to step into the Finance Committee. There will be an empty seat. So just wanted to let you guys know that. Do we have any public comments from anybody on the committee? No public comment from the committee. Any public comment from anybody in the public? No public comment from anybody in the pub. Oh, I'm sorry, Heather Lemieux, you have your hand up.
No, I just want to, after your announcement, Terry, just thank you for all your years of service to the town. I know when I came here, you were, I believe, the chair, or just coming on as the chair. And it's been a pleasure working with you. So thank you for all that you've volunteered to the town.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure working with you too. It's been a pleasure seeing you. You basically, just the growth of and all of the changes to the town, and it's been a busy several years. So thank you. And then with that, I see Steve Walker is here. He's probably anxious to get his presentation out of the way. And if he unmutes himself, then it will probably go even better. Thank you, Steve. With that, Peter, if you would bring up the presentation, that would be most awesome. Peter's sleeping through.
Yeah, no. Bear with me for just a sec. For some reason, because it was in PowerPoint, not PDF, I couldn't find it. But I just,
okay.
So now let me just see what screen this is going to open to. Of course, the wrong one. Move that over here. And here. Okay.
You having issues or?
Yeah, I was just having an issue now because when I opened the
there we go.
PowerPoint took over my multiple screens and I couldn't get back to Zoom, but obviously I've overcome my limitations. So.
Yes, you have. Thank you so much.
This should be interesting because I don't know nothing about the sewer commission.
Oh.
Well, that's a problem, isn't it?
Well,
it's a new thing we're doing this year,
then.
Steve. You got to present someone else's budget.
That would be.
I think we should. I think next year that would be kind of fun. That would be a good way to do it.
You know what? I think that would be really entertaining. All right. Try this again. Take 3.
That looks better. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Walker, the floor is all yours.
I appreciate that, Madam Chair. Thank you. If we can go to the next slide, I have my compulsory preamble that says the public access cable revenue is restricted for our media access purposes and doesn't affect town budgets. The franchise fee from Comcast is the principal source of PAC income. So we don't take income from the town. We take income from Comcast, which is a fee based on their use of public rights of way throughout the town. In addition, we also get a small amount, because interest rates are low, monthly from the funds reserved for the new studio. So if we could go to the next one, which I'm sorry tends not to be very readable on this scale. Starting at the top, we have salaries, which includes Joe, who actually runs our station for us, and includes in the budget an amount for a production technician that was approved last year. But we are in the process of beginning to bring that person on board right now. The reason we've been stuck is kind of COVID, as you might imagine, because actually bringing someone on, training them, isn't going to work when a lot of the facilities are closed. Also, the amount of work we've been doing, a lot of town events, school sporting events, school events, all sorts of things have not been quite the same. So up there's salary for Joe and a part-time person. Earlier this last year, we had to change our videographers from contract workers, which is 1099, to part-time unbenefited employees. And that was done because of the law, because we schedule them, we tell them what to do, and they use our equipment. So it turns out the correct way of doing that, which we were not aware of, is to make them part-time employees. So that's what the 22,000 is there. That's 103,000 roughly altogether for the salary element. As we go down, we have 6,000, which is our TC Passio's rent. We have vendor expenses with 2,000. We still have a legal expense line that was to do with the Cable Advisory Committee and negotiating the new franchise deal. We occasionally need to buy services from other people. The consultant services, we have a technical guy who's available to us on demand. He actually works for Fitchburg Access TV. Very good guy, comes on, helps us with new technology and things. We have advertising, which is primarily the Lunenburg Ledger. Office supplies, that's, well, it's a number. Equipment and supplies, we need things like batteries, memory cards, things like that from time to time. The next line is new equipment, which we have been, we've typically had that at 120,000. And that's because we weren't sure when we would get our new space. We wanted to be prepared to be able to start equipping a new space. It seems unlikely that we'll have our new space inside the next financial year. And even if it becomes likely, we have a meeting in a special town meeting, usually I think in November. So we put that at 30,000. The health insurance has been moved to some direct charges, which are done at the beginning of the year, called Indirect Costs. And right now it's showing 48,000 as the actuals. But we have, with Karen Rochu, we reworked that one because it was assuming that the part-time person came on board. which is unlikely to happen any time during this financial year. So it's actually reduced to a little over 16,000. It doesn't really affect anything else here. However, for financial 22, we've put it back in at the real number, assuming we get somebody starting with us as soon as possible. If I could have the next slide, I would appreciate it. So the estimated Comcast fee income, what was done here is we took the Comcast fee income, which is a little under 50,000 per quarter, so around about just under 2,000. I would like to be able to make this slide more accurate, but I don't have the data yet. We don't have the February number for that quarter. And the other thing we would like to be able to bring into this is what the situation is with cable cutting, subscribers going over to data-fed streaming networks and avoiding having to pay this. But anyway, the expected financial 22 income from Comcast, a little under 200,000. One of our charters is to make sure our operational expenses remains under that number so we can continue to go. If I could have the next slide, this is the slide showing the indirect costs, and you will see that this was the corrected one to show the 16,800. We also have right down at the bottom that actually reduced our costs for this present financial year. I used the number, as I mentioned before, that we expect to need with a fully benefited part-time production technician. So in the summary budget, the salaries, that includes a part-time benefited person who takes the best package possible from the benefits, medical and everything else, of 103,224. Operations excluding salaries, so that's all the rest of it, but actually includes the capital, the 30,000 in there. 87,000. Sorry?
Am I on the wrong? Yeah, I was on the wrong slide. Sorry, go ahead.
And our income, our estimated income, 199,337. So we are, by this budget, keeping total operations less than the expected income. The rest of the money we're keeping on one side is ready for our new studio once the space situation gets resolved, which needs the TCP Building Reuse Committee to come to a conclusion, and then we'll see what the next steps are. The TCP Building Committee has taken into account our needs for space. They actually put us in a very sensible space in the midst of all the meeting rooms and everything, which would actually make our operation much more efficient. One of the issues we have with a town of 4,000 subscribers and 11,000 people or so is our budget is significantly less than some of our neighbors like Fitchburg and Leominster. So we're going to use the money we have put on one side to use technology to help us deal with this. So the Pac Fund Summary, if I could have that one up, shows the certified amount at the end of last financial year was 750,000. I took the operations and such like the actual ones, the expected income, because of the way this last year went, where we had very few school events, very few town events, a lot of Zoom type meeting coverage. We spent less than we expected. The retained earnings at the end of FY21 is estimated to be about 840. That is what's needed when we get new space to install a proper multifaceted studio, multi-control room, and bring the whole interface to Comcast together with that complete environment. Right now, we don't have a prediction of how that's going to be or the timing of it. One other thing I'd like to bring up on the next slide is there is a proposal in front of the Massachusetts government, both the House and the Senate. This is only covering state. It would impose a fee on using rights of way for delivering streaming video services. So when people move from the contractual Comcast video services budget line item, they move into the data item, data line, and we have no control or anything over that. But a lot of videos moving there. This is something that's been done with other states and municipalities. We're not alone in this. The monies would be collected at a state level, dispersed based on population. 20% would go to the state general fund, 40% would go to the municipality, and 40% would come to PAC, or the community media. The intent of doing this is as cable cutting happens, and it's very difficult to judge how that's going to happen because with COVID, a lot of stay-at-home people probably kept service they may not have wanted because they also needed the internet access. So we'll see how this comes along, but it's in progress right now. So the last slide is a rather boring one because it's a generic proposed warrant. And so this is the one that says transfer from funds is basically what we would be doing to fund us for the FY22. And the motion that would be put together will have the specific numbers as I've described. So at which point I can either take your questions or go and pour myself a single malt.
Well, I see that Peter has a question, but you can probably pour yourself a malt while he asks if you'd like. I mean,
Thank you. That's your last action as chair. I appreciate
Don't
it.
let me keep you up.
So we can drop the slides. Thank you.
so Peter, if you want to go ahead.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Thorough and succinct as always. So really appreciate that. I have a question and then a comment. And my question is really just a technicality because I don't remember, and perhaps either you, Mr. Walker, or the town manager can answer this. When we appropriate funds for PAC, is that a regular budget appropriation whereby unspent funds would roll into free cash, or does it just roll back into your revolving fund?
No, it goes back into the revenue fund. It's restricted for that, and that's the only sensible way for us to operate looking for a new studio, because that's the kind of monies we need to properly equip a new studio. So it, as we don't use it, rotates back into the revenue fund.
So suffice to say, the number that gets put in the warrant article effectively becomes a spending cap on PAC for that year?
Out of that fund.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. And then my comment is the same comment I made last year, which is, I understand that we're operating in a period of declining funds for PACs due to the nature of cable cutting that Mr. Walker explained. Eventually, this is something that will either need to be figured out through state legislation or by the town itself through some kind of underfunding mechanism. But I consider this to be absolutely compulsory for the success of our local democracy as a primary means of keeping interested people informed of what's going on. So, and I thank you and your committee for their service to making sure that happens.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, so the first one is kind of a silly question, but is there a way to get some software or some change where the thumbnails that show up for the videos aren't goofy pictures of all the select members and that sort of thing?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite follow that
If you
question.
go to YouTube and you look at the YouTube videos, they're always like these goofy pictures of like someone just caught in a random yawn or something else. And there's a way from a technology standpoint to say like the thumbnail is
Well-
like the title of the meeting or something like that.
Okay, we try to put a banner on the bottom saying what the meeting is. The problem is that takes a little bit of space at the bottom. We're also bound somewhat by what Zoom is able to do because we've had to create and work with people like Castus, that's our principal server, and others to make sure that we can take two things, both a Zoom-only meeting like this one and put it directly out on the channel. But also we're going to be moving to a hybrid model where people can join in, can actually be at a meeting once we're all vaccinated and properly masked, and also have people join in via Zoom. However, what people do on Zoom is pretty much out of our control. So if anyone puts up a cat face or something like that, the person hosting the meeting, whoever's in charge of it, their only option really is to shut them down.
Yeah, Steve, I think actually what Chris is referring to is when you go to YouTube and you want to look at the videos,
Yeah.
is there a way to put a picture on each of the presentations rather than, because I think what he's referring to is the thumbnails on YouTube when you go to look is where you see a picture of somebody caught mid-sentence or something. So they kind of look silly on YouTube.
Very random, I think, the way.
Yeah.
It is
Okay.
very random. So I
you
guess
go
the
to, like,
question is there a way to have a picture on the thumbnail itself of town hall or something, or announcing that it's the finance committee or something?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is when you're trying to go into YouTube and then
Yeah.
the first picture comes up. Typically that's randomly pulled out of the stream. So I'll talk to Joe and see if we can instead make it a picture of either our town manager or town hall, whichever
Right.
is better.
So I guess my second question is there a plan ever to go to HD broadcast? Because if you are watching it on, channel 8 and something gets brought up on the screen, it's usually hard to read the material that's up there.
I'm very sorry about that. There was a cable advisory committee, which I was part of, and one of our requests was to actually move to a high definition. We pushed that as hard as we could, but they'll only give us standard definition. However, when that becomes available, all our equipment end to end, from the camera through all the editing, all through the Castus system, we do everything in high definition until the very last step when we send it to Comcast, and we have to down convert it to standard definition. So I absolutely would love to have all of this in high def, but I'm sorry, I don't have that ability.
Okay, and then my final question in kind of to the franchise fee and the effect of cord cutting and all that. How is the rate set? I was noticing on my last Comcast bill, it's up to about $5 a month on franchise fees. Is it fixed at the consumer level on that, or is there like a budget that's allocated and you just divide by the number of people that still have
The
cable?
way that's done, each contract with people like Comcast, Verizon, anybody else is negotiated individually at the municipality, town level. And ours used to be 2.5%. We actually, for the last, and it's a 10-year contract, managed to get it up to 5%. And that was in preparation for us to have a new studio and do as much as we can with it. So it's 5% of the gross video services fee that Comcast takes in. And it is apparently all auditable. I've never tried doing any of that. The cable cutting that we've seen looking across other packs and such like in the state looks like it's somewhere between maybe 3 and 8% per year. So we're in good shape for a while yet, and we have to hope that legislation that I talked about goes through.
So what would, if that legislation went through, what would that look like to the consumer, to the?
That I can't predict, but it most likely will show up as a franchise fee on the bills. But it will be based on something different. It's not just the video services. And I don't know if they're going to try doing it just on data, ISP type services, or if somehow they're going to have to manage to only put this fee on video streaming services. This is not, in that sense, a video streaming service that we're using right now. But if I'm watching Disney Plus or Hulu or whatever, that would be a video streaming service. So it's too early. I'm sorry, I can't give you a good answer on that.
Okay. It just seems to me that at some point, if the percent of people in town that have cable is low enough, then perhaps the real answer is just to add this to our tax base or something like that. So proportionally, it's better shared.
I understand that, although this is a fee like you would pay on a service that you've opted to have, which is cable. If it gets transferred into what becomes a town tax, I think you will get some people who would be uncomfortable with that, he says diplomatically.
Yeah, but I mean, it's an unfair one because some people pay it and others just reap the benefit of it because they watch it via streaming or other means.
You're absolutely right, and thank you for saying that because it drives me nuts.
Okay.
Thank you for your
And I think-
contribution, Chris.
I'm sorry, Peter?
I wanted to thank Chris personally for his contribution.
Yeah, well, last year you thanked me.
Madam Chairwoman, can I say something, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Menard, I manage the YouTube uploads and they only give us a few options for thumbnails. So I try to make sure it's not a bad one. I can look into adding a graphic instead.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I was scolded at town meeting. If you look at the town meeting one.
The town meeting one is great.
Me.
Joe, will they let us just put a logo up or something?
I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that.
Okay, we can talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think, and I, both to Peter and Chris's point, I do agree that we will have to be looking at how we're paying for the services, because given the number of people who either get it through Facebook or through just going to YouTube to see it, it is kind of an unfair burden on one portion of the town that's getting smaller and smaller as time goes by. So,
And perhaps it's even on, those that can't afford it as much as, the others. So there might be a disproportional impact that way as well.
It's actually based on the video services you take. So if you take the basic package, it's a proportion of a very small number because that's a subsidized number.
Yeah.
well, that's good to know too. So, all right, if there are no more questions for Mr. Walker, we can cut him loose. I do just, yes, you can have your malt.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. And then I am going to ask if it's, I know Dave McDonald is here and I know he's popping on the screen, and I'm going to ask if he is going to be doing the sewer presentation.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Can hear you great.
Okay, I'm going to be doing part of it. We're going to be doing it in 3 sections tonight, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Okay,
Do you want us to put up the presentation, or would you prefer to be loading it yourself and
you have a copy of our presentation. If you want to do it, that's fine with us.
okay, it's going up. So, yeah, just let us know when you're ready to move on and who's doing which parts.
Okay, so I'm going to be doing the introduction. But before I do that, Madam Chair, I just want to say I'm very disappointed to hear that you're leaving your position. You've done an outstanding job over the years, and there's always room for you to come join us on the Sewer Commission or any other board you want. You're a great lady, and I really respect the hell out of you. So again, thank you for what you've done for the town. It's unmeasurable. So,
Thank you.
okay, so first thing I'd like to do is go through our year in review. My name is Dave McDonald. I'm the chairman of the board of the commission for the sewer. I've been doing this job now for just about a year and a couple of months. One thing I just want to say is it has been a tough year. It's been a year ago now that we had a declaration of emergency here in Massachusetts as far as with COVID. And I remember sitting with my employees at work saying, it's only going to be a couple of weeks, don't worry. And here we are a year later. By doing so, though, we had to change our business. And I remember sitting down with you and going over our budgets in a really different way. And if you remember, right, nobody knew what the hell Zoom was. I was just learning how to work Skype, if you guys remember that. So I have to say that when this all started, we sat down with Barbara and Jack at the DPW and had to go over our new way of doing business. And I just want to report that it was a tough year for all of us. It was a tough year for the citizens of Lunenburg. It was a tough year for everybody. But out of it, though, we saw a lot of good things. And some of the good things were how the people reacted, how people got together. You know, our first responders are there. But you also got to thank the grocery store workers. You got to thank the gas station attendants. And most of all, you got to thank every citizen in town who came together and helped. And I can't be neglected to say I got to thank everybody at the DPW, every employee who was out there every day doing their jobs without really worrying about what's happening. And the same thing with you on the boards. Every board got together and did their thing, and I'm very proud of that. And I remember at the presentation a year ago that some people were saying that the sky was falling and we got to cut our budgets, and you guys took the brunt of that. You have to cut the town budgets by millions of dollars. Well, I just got to say I got the utmost respect for not only the chairs of each division, but the commissions, but most of all, our town leadership. That starts with Heather. Ms. Lemieux did a great job guiding this town through a crisis. And I just think that we all heard that as well. So without ado, I'd like to start our presentation. First thing is our current sewer team. Now, we went through a lot of different personnel during the year, and we have a very good team. Again, my name is Dave McDonald, the chairman. We have John Reynolds, who's on the sewer. He's our vice chair. Brett Ramson, he's our clerk. Mr. Luck, and Mike Devakis. Our staff would be DPW supervisor Robert Oliver, which you're going to be talking to in a little bit. Our business manager Bob Lever, and our minute taker Jane Rainley. Now we're going to be going over a couple of things here, so if I repeat myself, I apologize. But there's just a lot of things that happen, and I want to make sure not only you but the town knows what's been going on with the Sewer Enterprise Fund. Before we start, we also again had changes all through the year. One was Jack Rodigans. Jack ran our DPW for 25 years. He ran the sewer since it was his inception in 2006. We all are debt of gratitude to Jack for what he's done for the town and for what he did for the sewer. But in return, we have a really nice guy, Rob Oliver. He's our new DPW director. If you haven't got a chance to see him, I wish everybody go down and have a cup of coffee with him. He told me that he would buy, so that's good. So we're going to get a free cup of coffee from Rob. But he's been shown to be excellent at what he does, and he helped us out through a lot of things on the sewer. And we also want to thank Mr. Luck. Mr. Luck has served on the Sewer Commission since its inception in 2006. He'll be stepping down from the commission on April 30th, which will leave an opening. Actually, there's 2 openings on the sewer. I hope people come out to town caucus, which I'm glad we're having. And Chris, I know you're working on that as well. But I remember last year during the town caucus, you're a good person to work with, and I appreciate everything you did to get the vote out. It was good. And I hope you get a better result this year as well, because things are getting back to normal. But we do want to thank Mr. Luck for what he's done for the sewer. Next page. So there you go. The Sewer Commission was established in 2006 as an enterprise fund. The town has 16 miles of gravity-fed sanitary lines, 3.9 miles of force mains, 2.3 miles of low-pressure sewer, and 7 lift stations and 3 pump stations. And there are approximately 900 properties now connected to town sewer, which is good. The town has contracted various vendors to make our systems more efficient. Our vendor now, our operations maintenance vendor, is Chad Empey from, forgot what town he's in. He's in the next town, Leominster. He's keeping our pump stations running efficiency and properly. We're very happy with these guys. We also deal with flow assessment, and we're going to be talking about this as we go along. Flow assessment will handle all our flow meters going into town for data and how we get billed to Fitchburg and Leominster. Next page. Last year, I came aboard above you guys and talked about an increase. We really didn't know how COVID was going to affect our budgets, same as you. It was very tough on how to figure out and throw a dart. Was there going to be people paying their bills? Were there going to be more usage charges because people were home? I'm telling you, we did a lot of work in the first month just trying to figure out where we're going to go and how we're going to be fair to everybody. And I thought everybody did a great job on doing that, including our customers, because we did raise the rates last year. The rates previously were increased in April 2013, and that was 7 years since the last increase. Now, the reason why I came to you guys last year and talked about an increase is that in business, as everything else, expenses keep going up, and we try to control those expenses. But the sewer is kind of like caught in the middle. I mean, we get expenses from Fitchburg and Leominster, and that's what we have to pay. So that's where our sewer goes. It's really that easy. I mean, there's some other complicated things in there with betterments and so on. But every time that total flushes, it goes either to Leominster or goes to Fitchburg, and we pay them for that service. Over the last couple of years, and you see the rate increases, by the way, Fitchburg is planned at 8% increase through 2022. Leominster rate increase is 4% through 2021. Leominster changed over this year to a flow-based billing. When I say flow-based, usually we would pay our bills by the water bills. So if you have 5 gallons of water going in your house, we assume there's 5 gallons of sewer going out. Well, this year, Leominster and Fitchburg, actually, in our IMA agreement, we have, it's called I&I, and that's infiltration of water. It gets in through broken pipes. It gets in through people putting sub pumps onto the line. But all that extra water goes to Leominster, and we got to pay for that. And that's why we're now working with I&I, with Leominster and with Rob, because Leominster has the same problem we got over in the Whalum area. They have experience with a lot of I&I, so I know our goal is to start working with them. At the time of 2000 budget, we've ended with an agreement with our O&M contractor. Now, we went out to bid, and we received, and if you want to flip the page. Last year, I think if I talked to you, we were going to hire somebody temporarily because we had parting of the ways of our last O&M contractor. We went out to bid in April. We contracted Empry for time and material basis for our maintenance program. Al Packett and Chad had recently worked on the pump stations, and they were aware of how our knowledge and expertise and how our systems worked. In May, the commission went out to bid for a new contractor to manage all our 10 pump stations. In September, we hired Empry to continue operating and maintain the pump stations. We're so satisfied with these guys. They're taking care of not only us as far as service and maintenance, but they're also a good working relationship partnership. So we're very happy with them and look forward to a continuing service with them. Our next page is the new IMA intermunicipal agreement and responsibilities. In 2020, we started paying a 20-year debt services to Fitchburg. It's approximately $21,000 a year. In 2021, we start paying debt services to Leominster, approximately $32,000, and this will go until at least 2024 when we negotiate a new IMA. Now, again, we are trying to talk to Leominster and see what we can do before that agreement is expired and see how we can work this out as far as our IMA over in that area. The flow meter readings run higher than water usage due to the inflow and infiltration of water. Effective on October 20th billing, Leominster began billing Lunenburg for flow usage. Estimates affect this changeover could range up to an extra $200,000. Now, we had that problem last year. We still have to go through a cycle. And do I feel it's going to be 200,000? No, but it also depends on how much rain you get. It depends on a lot of factors. And I think Barbara did a great job in budgeting in where we think we're going to be as it reflects in the budgets that you guys received tonight. The next part of this presentation, I'd like to introduce Rob Oliver. He's been a great partner of the sewer division, and he's going to go over some of the new maintenance policies that we're doing and some of our policies and procedures that we're implementing. So, Rob, if you're there, you're up, buddy.
I am here. Good night, everyone. It's nice to see you all again. So we've been working on a maintenance plan that our consultant Rice Pierce has provided this fall when I came onto the scene. It still needs to be finalized. We're gathering comments from the commission members, myself. Those recommendations will go back to our consultant who will finalize the report. Once it's finalized, the recommendations that are made will be used to properly maintain the system and schedule routine maintenance on a yearly or more basis, something that will help streamline operations and make sure all maintenance is being carried out. The commission is dedicated to reducing the I&I. As Dave mentioned, we're now being billed for the actual flow that goes to each town rather than what water meter readings reflected as usage by our customers. This obviously means that we're paying for any water that enters the system that didn't go down a drain. That can be rainwater. It could be a sump pump connected illegally to the system. It could be a building drain connected to the system. Water leaking through manholes, pipes, pipe joints. So, as you can imagine, that can add up quickly depending on the system. We're fortunate that most of the system is new. It's it's PVC. It's modern. Although, as Dave mentioned, in the Whalum area, there's a lot of services that are not current. They're not PVC. They're old clay lines that let in water. So part of the goal is to reduce I&I everywhere we can. And that will help, stabilize and bring down cost. Fiscal 22 budget numbers are inflated to account for this. We don't know what those numbers will be. Currently, we've just started in this billing this way, or being billed by Fitchburg and Leominster this way. Last fall, we were in drought conditions, which is going to result in minimal inflow and infiltration, which is good. However, we're not getting a handle yet on what I&I is going to do to our numbers. So that's still being assessed. Woodard & Curran is provided a third-party review of I&I reports that have previously been done for the commission. This was done in 2020 rather, and it was done to determine actions that we can take to better control the effect of I&I on those flow measurements, and obviously, again, with the ultimate goal of trying to keep costs down. The plan going forward is to start addressing the I&I with different projects. Basically, that Woodard & Curran report has some good projects we can take that have a relatively short return on investment. So I'd like to start tackling those and hopefully start controlling that I&I. And again, as Dave mentioned, Flow Assessment, our consultant who manages and handles the flow meters at 3 different points in town, I believe 2 to Leominster, 1 to Fitchburg. They're working with us to keep those updated, make sure they're accurate, make sure that everything they're recording is an accurate depiction of the flow that is actually going through there. Again, we don't want to pay for any more than we have to. Next slide, please. Also included in this year's budget, the Sewer Commission is proposing to add a 19-hour per week assistant business management position to support Barb, the sewer business manager, with her administrative duties. So that's a non-benefited position, 19 hours a week. As of the close of fiscal year 20, the Sewer Commission and the Enterprise Fund had approximately $2 million in retained earnings. The fiscal 22 budget requires transfer from retaining earnings of $332,699 to fund the operating budget. That includes additional monies for the increased cost to Leominster and that changeover. The commission has voted to include $100,000 for planned capital expenditures. As I said, with a focus on a quick return on investment between 1 and 5 years. $121,400 in debt service over betterment revenues. And then approximately $31,600 is budgeted as a transfer to OPEB and the Capital Reserve Stabilization Fund. And of course, with the enterprise account, any unexpended expenses that were budgeted are returned to the retained earnings at the end of the fiscal year. Next. And Barb, I think I was going to let you take over here.
Yep. Hello there, everybody. Just going to run through our summaries of the budget that you all had been sent, hopefully. 992,000 in the user charges is estimated. You know, all these it's an estimate as always. Connection fees, we're planning on just about a 2% growth in numbers. The sewer bank and the sewer bank is just a fee that's collected to help I&I charges. It's required actually through the Leominster IMA, but also required by the state. So we collect monies in order to be able to have I&I projects. Penalties and interest just from demands or late payments. Drain layer fees. The grease trap annual permit fees for the second year have been waived by the commission. Just the grease traps are obviously for our restaurants, and they've had quite a tough go with COVID. So for the second year, they are waiving those permit fees. Investment income is down from prior, but that's just based on current activity. The transfers from the capital reserve and the reserve capacity, both of those numbers are down in the expenses. They're being transferred from stabilization funds for expenses in the budget. Next slide. And expenditures. We got payroll for 72. We've broken out what the estimate is for to have an extra person. Just in helping with the administration. There's a lot of times when there's just a lot going on, and trying to get to both and get the billing out has always been a challenge. So the commission has finally agreed to allow me to put this forward, and I appreciate it very much. Also, just for cross training, we've got to have somebody else that knows the process and can fill in if I am unavailable. Say that. Purchase of service is a good size number. It includes the outsourcing that we do contractually, both for the MP operations and maintenance contract on the pump stations and flow assessment. Also has our proposed expenses for infrastructure, which covers emergency repairs and replacements. I&I work, our legal costs, and engineering if we are to go out for any consulting. That's the line that has our proposed budget for it. Utilities is fairly flat. It was almost, I don't know if it's level funded, but it's very, very close to last year's. Under other departmental expenses, their total is like 847,000. Just wanted to break it out a little bit so you could see the that Leominster and Fitchburg direct costs, which is the estimated usage costs, and also connection fees that we have to pay to those cities when we have new connections come on, is 692. So it's the major portion of that 847. Capital expenses, both ours for the town, and then the two payments that were previously noted that we have to pay debt service for Leominster and Fitchburg work. And just to make sure you understand, the Fitchburg is just John Fitch Highway. They had to increase the capacity, and part of it was for our flow. So we're only paying the portion of the debt service that is attributable to Lunenburg's use. Similarly, in Leominster, we only pay the debt or their percentage of our use of one of their wastewater stations. So it's just figured out based on the percentage we use. And then just miscellaneous charges. So the total expenses are 1,173,486. I didn't total the revenues on the slide before, but they are 1,068, 1,068,000. So there is a expense over proposed revenue. The indirect costs are 74. That's everything we pay towards the town. We pay a portion of Rob's salary to compensate for his time and much effort on our behalf. And so the total expenditures and indirects is 1,247,888.99. Next slide. And then, so here's the two, the 1,068,000 that we propose getting in, and 1,200,000 that we propose or estimate as our expenses. Again, higher by that 179,000. In that 179 deficit is the proposal of 100,000 that the commission has agreed to put aside for these capital projects to reduce the I&I. And as Rob said, hopefully we're working on projects that will be a quick return. So we may have to spend it, but we should save that money on the other side by reducing some of the inflow and infiltration. And 79,000, maybe more, on the estimate as far as the Leominster increased costs due to flow. We just don't know. It all depends on the weather, unfortunately. So that's our expense over income is 179,000. Debt service over betterment revenue is a deficit of 121,000. And so the two together are 301, 113.71. We are still transferring a small portion to go into the OPEB trust that the town has to pay, and also capital reserve. It has been, I think this is the 5th year that the commission has agreed to transfer 3% of their revenues into the capital reserve fund so that we are able to pull from that should we need major repairs. So our total retained earnings appropriation is 332,699.14. And again, what is not spent in the year, because it is an enterprise fund, will return to retained earnings. So we're hopefully estimating high on our costs, and those will just go right back into retained earnings if they are not used. All right, next page. Sorry, it's a bit small. This is just a page to show the retained earnings performance. Last year at the close of FY20, we had $2,023,242 in retained earnings. We had some taken out in 2021's budget, and then we're proposing this 211 to come out for this year, and that's in addition, the upper lines, the revenues and debt service are betterment funds. So And those are the constants. We don't have what the retained earnings withdrawal are going out, projected out, because it's an unknown. We would hope to present a balanced budget. So we're going to assume that. But as you can see, we take a bit of a dip while we're still paying the debt service, but then it does increase, and we are up at 22 million, 594,609 at the end of 2030. So that is the end of mine. Next slide is all about questions.
On the revenue side of the projected earnings, that is pretty much typically the betterment fees, is that
That
correct?
is, yes, that's the betterment and privilege fee income that is
Alright, and-
projected based on current connections. That can increase if we have other connections happen because, or I should say development. Everyone has been bettered or had a privilege fee assessed that has connected or has access to it. But if there is a subdivision where there is an increase in use, that amount can change and increase. But it wouldn't go down. Well, I shouldn't say it. It can go down if people pay it off early, but that just increases retained earnings, so.
Okay, Dave?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Dave Passios has his hands up, so.
Okay.
Thank
Sorry.
you. Yep. Barb, you'll remember this back, I'm thinking it was a couple years ago, it may be longer. Things go by very quickly the last few years. When the Sewer Commission updated and put in new irrigation meter policies and fees, I was critical about the whole process and particularly about the fees and how the whole thing was put together. Looked to me more like a revenue generator than anything else. I see you have the irrigation fees built into the revenues. Do you have an approximate number as to what that revenue number is that's come in from irrigation fees? And do you have an idea on the other side, the credited back balance generated by those meters? I'm not looking for exact numbers, just
Yeah.
approximates.
The irrigation income or for people to participate in a deduct meter program, they are charged $50 a year. And that was done, so it's about 2,000, maybe 2,500 of our income. And that was done because they have been very labor intensive, and it was the intent of the commission to not allow all the customers to pay increased rates because of a handful of people that were requiring extra time and administration. So it was not meant to necessarily be a big revenue generator. It was just meant to cover the costs of running the program, because we've had updates happening. We've had everyone install radio meters. So we've taken a lot of the manual reading of the meters out of the program. But in order to do that, we now pay Northern Data for the software upload. So there's that's a wash. But it's just we've gone radio and hopefully will allow it to take less labor, because it was coming in, there were it was just so much error, room for error with the manual readings.
So at the end of the day, the reading of the meters did not go into an agreement with the water district.
They are doing it as part of their drive arounds. So it is, yes, now it's a radio read. And the Sewer Commission did not have to pay for all the equipment to do that. And the water department has taken that on for us at a cost, but.
Okay, so the other fee you mentioned is a download of that information. Is that what
Right.
you were talking? Okay. Okay. And that's an annual fee of $50?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have maybe on the top of your head, a rough idea on how much those meter readings have credited back to users?
I have never come at it from that angle. I have not, because it all depends on the person's watering. Are they a big gardener or do they not? I have never done a study of what actually is the total. I can get it for you though.
No, that's okay. I just thought you might have the number. And my point was back then that the way the whole thing was structured, you had to use an awful lot of water. You had to water acres of land pretty much for it to be even worth doing. With the cost of replacing, even the people that had irrigation meters ended up having to change either the heads or the meters completely. So there was a fairly substantial expense there, and so on and so forth, just to be able to sign into the program, and then the $50 fee on top of that. So I don't know where the break-even point is. I never had a chance to figure it out, but I do know that the amount that I water here, I would never make it back in a lot of years with the cost of the meter and everything.
Right.
But that was my point at the time, and it sounds like everybody's okay with it. So thank you.
Peter?
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, Peter's comment.
Sorry, trying to find the mute button. So I'm looking at your projected retained earnings slide, that last slide that you showed. And in 2025, 26, you've got a pretty substantial drop off, actually from 24 to 26, you've got a very substantial drop off in debt service from about 640,000 to about 184,000 in annual debt service, which I understand is a lot of that debt service coming off from the original construction and the 20-year bonds that were taken when we actually built the sewer back in the early 2000s. My question is why is the betterment hangover where we're actually have revenues seemingly relative to that debt service is actually holding pretty steady out until 2029? Were the betterments made over a longer term, or were they applied late, or how did that? What's causing that to occur?
I do know that the debt began before we really assessed the betterments, and the betterments were put out for 20 years. Any new developments where they're assessed a privilege fee go out another 10. So there's been extension to the revenue side, where the debt service began when the sewer started going in the late 90s and early 2000s, and they're coming slowly.
To give you an example, Peter, if you look at what we did up on Pratt Street, that was another extension. So you're going to see that extend that out over a few more years. But the bulk of the system is right. You're correct. It's being paid off.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Yeah, I understand the debt service costs associated with what's happening with Fitchburg and Leominster, and that being charged proportionately to use in Lunenburg. I guess as a consumer, the way I think of this kind of thing, like I'm a ratepayer to Unitil, but I don't pay debt service on Unitil's new building. It's kind of absorbed in the rate. We're seeing rate increases because of the way that they're charging based on flow, and we're also get the added privilege of helping to pay for their capital. And I understand that we're not in the best negotiating position because our system is engineered to flow to them. Like, we don't have a whole lot of choice here. But I guess my question is are we getting a fair deal, or are we getting kind of screwed here?
A few years ago, the IMA with Fitchburg was renegotiated with Bob Eversole and Carl Luck. And that was a pretty good understanding of how it's going. So yeah, there was a reduction back then. But again, what is a good deal? I mean, if you look at the way we're running sewer now, we're trying to keep our rates down for our consumers. I don't think we're sitting here asking you or telling you guys we're going to raise the rates again. We're very conscious of our customers. We're also very conscious in growth. I mean, we would love to get more customers online. Even right now, you may live on a property where the sewer goes right by the front of your house. I would hope someday you would tie in. I mean, the more people to tie in, that would help us with the rates as well. So 900 customers is not really what you call a sewer system. It's and Rob, you and I talked about this. It's there, and we're just trying to do what's right for our customers. And
Yeah. And to clarify, Mr. McDonald, I'm not questioning the value that you bring to the ratepayers in Lunenburg. I'm questioning the relationship between the Lunenburg Sewer Department and the Fitchburg and Leominster Sewer Departments. That's the point of my question.
I don't understand that question. Then are you saying that we're not getting along with Fitchburg and Leominster? Or?
No, I'm saying, are we getting a fair deal? That's my question.
You know what? It's and Rob, maybe you know that from other towns you work in, but I think it's a pretty good deal.
If I may, I can comment on that. In the IMA, typical IMA between communities includes some sharing of capital costs, and it's typically based off, the percentage of flow expected from Lunenburg as in Fitchburg's total, say. I'd compare it or make an analogy to, you bring your car to a mechanic, and if he upgrades his equipment to provide you a better service, typically that cost is passed on to his customers in some form. So, it's that they're providing us a service, they're upgrading equipment, providing, the capacity for us to send our flow to them in a manner that works. So I think it's fair that, we pay a portion of that cost. If you're a Fitchburg resident and they have to increase rates because of capital improvements, we're essentially also a customer of Fitchburg, but they can't raise our rates. So, we pay them on the capital side of things. So, as much as I don't like paying people, I do think it's fair and it's equitable the way it's charged.
Now, when IMAs were done back 20 years ago, I don't think at the time, if I'm looking at it, if I was my lawyer, put my lawyer hat on, could have done a better deal back 20 years ago. Yeah, probably. I mean, IMAs were virtually new back then. They weren't really done the way they are today. So we're looking forward to sitting down with our partners in Fitchburg and Leominster and looking at what kind of a deal we can get. But Fitchburg and Leominster, you got to remember, Fitchburg now, and Rob, you know as I do, they spent, $100 million on changing over their sewer from the storm drains. I mean, that was a big nut that was going on in Fitchburg. And everybody needed cash at the time. So if you ask me if it was a good deal with everything going on in Fitchburg, I think it's a real good deal. My opinion.
All right. My only other comment was, I think you made some great points during your introduction, Mr. McDonald, but I want to thank you personally because you've been a tremendous advocate for Lunenburg throughout your time here, but particularly over the course of the last year and all your endeavors. And I personally really appreciate that. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I also appreciate all the support that not only you, but all the townspeople has given to us. And again, from the bottom of our hearts, I want to thank each and every one of you for what you have done, not only for the town, but for yourself and the community. And that's where it all goes. And if we're all thinking the same way, that would be a great thing. But one last note, I'm out of here tomorrow. I'm going on vacation, so see you later.
Well, I think Mr. Menard has a few questions for you. You're not going yet.
Yeah, not yet. Nope. Go ahead, Chris.
So the on the retained earnings, is there a goal that you seek to get to on that? Because at some point you could pass on a savings to the ratepayers and kind of reduce retained earnings. Is there like a percentage policy or anything like that you're trying to achieve in that?
The sewer division for its stinks, and as long as it's been around, has really, how am I going to word this? The retained earnings have been working over the last 8-9 years through betterment fees and stuff, but we have to put money back into the system. That hasn't been done. And when Rob came on board, we now have a maintenance plan that we're very proud of. So you're going to start seeing money going back into our systems on upgrading our pumps and support, and those are expensive. I mean, I know Mr. Luck made a comment that pumps are expensive, and he's not off track. They are expensive. If there's a way to keep the rates down, would we like to do that? Yeah, but it's a business. You know, the bottom line is that we're an enterprise fund that is a business, and we do not want to go to town meeting and say, hey, by the way, you know, we get no money now. We're going to have everybody share, which almost happened, Bob, back in 2008, 2009, when the fee started getting low. So to be self-sufficient is the number one goal, Chris, and I think we're there.
So I guess the question is how does one assess whether you have a healthy amount in there or an unhealthy amount of retained earnings?
I will give that one to you.
You what?
No, I was going to let Barb answer that one.
Oh,
Go ahead, Barb.
Oh, we have just, it's always been, I mean, we're happy to see it growing. For a while, it didn't have the best projection. It was much closer. So we have really left it alone a lot just to make sure we were in a good place and could cover any, you know, dramatic costs. So as it goes forward, and now we're looking out to 2030 and see that we've got, you know, 2.6 million. You know, we can take a look, but like Dave said, we're looking at doing some more capital corrections and investments too. So I don't know if we'll reduce rates. You know, it's a subject every year when the budget comes around, what we're going to do and how we're going to meet expenses. So
have you
don't have a
projected
number.
out then over the next 8, 10, whatever years, the capital improvements that would be needed that would then reduce that?
There's always capital expenditures here or there. I mean, if you look at our projections, what we have, and that's all those are projections, we really won't know. But to go back to what you were saying, sure. I mean, we could sit there and say, let's put $1 million to the side and see what happens. But if you look at what happened this year, we went for a 10% increase and that was it. And I think if I remember right, we sat here a year ago saying that we would like to put a 2 or 3% increase in every year. But we don't want to do that. I mean, right now, you're right. We got $2 million. What are we going to do with it? Well, we're going to reinvest it. That hasn't been done for a long time. So Rob is going to be the driving force as far as let's get the system to its maximum peak. And that could be expensive. Just the I&I problem in Wayland alone could cost well over $1 million, if not more. That's why we're looking for grants with Leominster to work that problem. So
I think part of the other, see, this is why I'm leaving now, because I basically lost the question mid-sentence. That I guess part of the question goes into, you know, like what is the typical lifespan of a sewer system, and, you know, like you know, like the retained earnings are going to have to be used over time to make those repairs or make those replacements. And I guess, you know, like not knowing how long a sewer pipe is supposed to last, you know, I guess that's where part of the question goes to, what's a good amount to have in retained earnings?
If Dave, if I can just step in here and talk a little bit, and this even goes back to Chris's question. I don't think there's a magic number on what the reserves are. Obviously, the more the better. You have to balance the needs of your customers and the rates you charge. But just as an example, in terms of capital expenditures, the biggest cost in our system would be replacing pump stations. We have 10 pump stations, 3 or 4 of which could easily cost $250,000 or more to rehab or replace. So you can see where that would be a major draw on your reserves if that got to that point. Our pump stations are about 20 years old now. They're probably approaching the end of their useful lives, and we're going to have to look at a program of tackling probably 1 or 2 at a time to modernize, upgrade, new equipment. So, like I said, there's no magic number. You know, if we had a catastrophic failure tomorrow, knock on wood, you know, you could easily lose 10% of that quickly. So for me, it's comfortable right now. I'd always like to see it about where it is. With the goal of some communities raise their rates yearly. I know Lunenburg hadn't done it in a number of years before it just recently went up. I'm hoping that can stay the same, and maybe you see your reserves dip a little bit until the next time you have to raise rates. So I don't think there's there's no equation to really nail it down other than you've got to have it socked away for a rainy day, and I think right now the enterprise fund's in a good place.
Okay.
Any other questions for the sewer commission? There being no other question, thank you. It's an excellent presentation, very clear, and really thanks for all you guys do. That's a lot of work to keep a lot of people in town happy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry, for all you do.
Yes,
Terry,
thank you.
there's an opening in here on our commission. You're more than welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, thank you. I know you're looking for people who use sewer. So, but certainly you're welcome to plug the vacancies and also just announce that the caucus is Monday night. So anybody looking to take a seat on the sewer commission, that would be a good place to go.
Well, I know with COVID, people still may be hesitant, but the world goes on, and I hope we can get people to go to caucus next. Is it Monday coming up?
It's Monday coming up. Yep. And if not, then hopefully Chris still has some free time so he can put together another slate of people to run for office. So.
Yeah, that's a once in a lifetime kind of situation, I hope.
It was Chris, if you need a hand doing that, just give me a call.
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
No, it was fun last year. I tell you, it was pretty good. But again, Terry,
Hey, if you want, we'll make you an admin on the page too. That would be fine. Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, folks. Have a great rest of the evening.
Rob, Barbara, thank you very much. Great job tonight, guys.
Thanks
Thank you.
all. Have a great night.
Have a good night, guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so that takes care of the presentations of all of the budgets that are not directly impacting the town budget or the town manager's part of the presentation. Are you going to just go straight through admin, unclassified, and debt service? And would you like someone else to run the screen, or do you want to share your own screen?
If Peter or Chris or Evan.
Yeah, I can do it. You want the PowerPoint, Heather?
Yes, please. Let me know if my internet, I guess I had internet issues the other night. It was unstable. So.
Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So this presentation is going to cover general government, health and sanitation, the unclassified budget, and debt and the capital plan. Next slide, please. So under general government, we have the select board, town manager, the town accountant, the treasurer collector, the assessor's budget, technology, town clerk, and land use. Next slide, please. So the proposed budget includes a funding for up to approximately 10 hours a week for a part-time, non-benefited board committee clerk position that would provide an identified need to committees such as finance, capital planning, stormwater, the TCP building design committee, and the personnel committee. Currently, volunteer members on those committees do the minutes, and this would assist those committees with getting minutes submitted to the town clerk in a timely manner. Minutes and all documents and exhibits used are the public records and part of the official record of the meeting. Public bodies are required to submit and approve minutes within the next 3 public body meetings or 30 days from the date of the meeting, whichever is later, unless the public body can show good cause for further delay. In my opinion, these official records are an important component of the requirements bestowed on public bodies and how the general public can learn about the ongoings and actions of their officials. On the assessor's budget, the assessors have undergone a lot of changes in the last year. We have shifted from a third-party company, RRG, to hiring an in-house principal assessor. And our longstanding administrative assessing assistant retired in April of 2020, and the assessing clerk was promoted to fill that vacancy. At this point, we are maintaining the current staffing levels, the principal assessor and the administrative assessing assistant, and are not looking to fill the assessing clerk position, but in the future years, this may be needed. Also, the assessors are in the process of converting the assessing software from CAMA, the old state assessing software, to Vision. Overall, there was a decrease of $795 from their target budget to what is being proposed, but this was an increase of $8,207 from fiscal 21 to fiscal 22 in their operating expenses. This is due to the second half of the payment to convert to Vision, which is due at the beginning of fiscal 22. And this cost will decrease by approximately $5,000 in fiscal 23 when the cost is just for the annual maintenance agreement for Vision. For IT, for staff, there is the IT director, Steve Malandrinos, who splits his time between the town and school. And we also have a network administrator. Since the fall, we've been able to hire a remote meeting coordinator that schedules all the Zoom meetings and assisted with Zoom meeting moderation. This position has been shared by both the town and school as well, but mostly town due to the number of town meetings versus school meetings. The fiscal 22 budget will reflect the current actual split of time for the IT director, which is 30% town and 70% school. And the network administrator will reflect 100% town. The IT budget had a $20,300 increase over fiscal 21 in software maintenance costs and transferred $19,300 from the hardware lease line to the central purchasing budget. This was the only increase in the central purchasing budget. The IT director will provide a further explanation of the IT budget at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. The town clerk budget is requesting additional hours for the assistant town clerk. Currently, the assistant town clerk works 24 hours, and this would bring that position to 32 hours. This is the second year that the town clerk has requested the additional hours for this position. The town clerk is partially recommending this as preparation for her eventual retirement and having sufficient staff hours to support all the expanding requirements of that office. You may see Kathy, the town clerk, Kathy Herrick's car on weekends at town hall. She often is there Saturday and Sundays just to get everything accomplished for that office. The land use director met with the committee on February 18th and explained the only increase in the land use budgets was for new building code books that would need to be purchased in fiscal 22. Next slide, please. So on to health and sanitation. This has been a challenging year all around for everyone, but to say this has been a year like no other is an understatement for the Board of Health. Since about a month before the governor declared a state of emergency last March, the Board of Health and Neshoba Associated Boards of Health started fielding questions about COVID-19, and by mid-March, they have been inundated with the need for assistance to navigate our way through this pandemic. I want to thank the members of the Board of Health Administrative Assistant, and Jim Gareffi of Neshoba Associated Boards of Health, who holds the titles of Director of Neshoba Associated Boards of Health, District Sanitarian, and our health agent. Outside of COVID, other services through Neshoba Associated Boards of Health include food inspections, recreational inspections, housing inspections, Title V related work, private well permits, rabies clinics, nursing visits, home health aid visits, rehabilitative therapy visits, and communicable disease investigations. This year, the increases to the health and sanitation budget reflect a 5% increase in our assessment to the Neshoba Health Services as well as Neshoba Nursing Services. Next slide, please. On to unclassified and looking just at the health insurance. I feel like we've covered this a number of times, but just to reiterate, our health insurance renewal estimate used in the preliminary budget was a 3% rate increase for active employees and a 5% rate increase for retirees. Our actual renewal was a minus 0.03% decrease for active employees and is still the 5% rate increase for retirees. This was primarily due to the post-65 program that we participated in the fall that moved a small number of employees that were not eligible to receive Medicare Part A as they did not contribute to Social Security. By participating, it reduced our active renewal rate by 2% and reduces our total claims under our active plans and reduces our OPEB liability by an estimated $5 to $6 million. Our insurance carrier offered an additional 0.5% reduction to our active renewal rate if we offered a new optional insurance for vision. We met with the Public Employee Committee and this was endorsed by them. And this brought our actual renewal rate for active employees to be minus 0.03% decrease. To point out,
I'm sorry, Heather.
yes.
All right. Is it a minus 5% or is it a minus 0.05%?
Minus 0.03.
No, I know. Okay, so that one's 0.03%, but you said something about a 5% reduction if you offered vision, but you really meant 0.05%?
I'm sorry, that should be 0.5. Sorry, no, 0.05. It brought our rate from the 0.47 to the minus 0.03, so 0.5%.
Okay, thank you.
0.5%.
0.5, okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Looking at the split of health insurance, 37% of our health insurance budget on the town side is for active town employees, 17% is retiree health insurance for town employees, and 47% is retiree health insurance for school employees. Next slide, please. This slide depicts the premium holiday that we received this year for a full month. So our active insurance plans for both the town and school are being further reduced by a premium holiday that Maya, through the Health Trust Board, announced for fiscal 22 for a full month of premiums. This equated to $128,076.36 on the town side, $241,257.67 on the school side, for a total savings of $364 in savings. And the recommendation that I've presented previously is to create a health insurance stabilization account and deposit that same amount, the $369,334, in the account to offset the return of paying 12 months of premiums in fiscal 23. Next slide, please. Also under unclassified is workers' comp and liability insurance. Our workers' comp renewal came in $5,018 higher than the estimate, and our liability renewal came in $4,807 lower than the estimate, for a total of $211 higher overall. Our police and fire injured on duty insurance is level funded for fiscal 22. Our assessment for Montechusett planning was a $90 increase from the current year. And the other categories under unclassified, such as historical commission, band concerts, unemployment, the reserve fund, the salary reserve, town reports, and physicals, have all been level funded. Next slide, please. So this slide shows our current debt schedule. The fiscal 22 preliminary budget and recommended budget at this time does not include any new borrowing, and our actual debt is decreasing by $136,927. And if we look at our current debt schedule and how it aligns with our debt policy, with our limits for non-exempt borrowing and exempt borrowing and a combined, we are currently below the limit for each of the thresholds per our financial policy. At the end of fiscal 23, starting fiscal 24, we have approximately $1,010,000 of excludable debt that will be dropping off for the primary school and the public safety complex. But this is also offset by the MSBA reimbursement that is excludable debt that is dropping off at the end of fiscal 23. Next slide, please. This slide depicts the current capital plan with a total of 13 projects totaling $1,499,825 with the recommended sources that we previously discussed. Next slide, please. So this slide is a depiction of potential changes. In looking at our available unexpended capital from previous capital projects, we know we have $9,397 that can go towards the fiscal 22 capital plan. And I'm waiting on final numbers for the fuel tank project, but there will be a possible surplus of up to $80,000 for that project. And as I mentioned at the last finance meeting, that I think we're in a situation that we do not have to draw on the $211,000 from the special purpose stabilization fund for the 6-wheel dump truck, and instead increase the amount of raise and appropriate by $211,000. As for the other money articles on the warrant, once those numbers are provided, I will be recommending that those will be paid using free cash, as they're all one-time expenses. And depending on the amount remaining in free cash, may be recommending to increase the amount of free cash towards the capital plan. I've highlighted in red the current projects that are not funded right now and highlighted the raise and appropriation number to show the impact of not drawing on the stabilization account and increasing the raise and appropriate number and the amount available right now of unexpended capital. And next, Steve will be taking over at this point, Steve Malandrinos, our IT director.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Steve Malandrinos. I'm the IT director for the town and the school department. Tonight, I'll give you an overview of the town technology budget. And if I could have the next slide, please. This is pulled directly from ClearGov. It's an overview of the technology budget for the town. I wanted to highlight a couple of lines that had significant changes in them. The software maintenance line is fairly self-explanatory. It's software and services. And hardware lease was previously used to cover leases of copiers, purchases of toner, things like that to keep the town printing. We have moved to a managed print service agreement, and toner is all included, service is all included. We've actually reduced that number a bit and moved that money all into central purchasing, as the town manager mentioned earlier. So if we can slide to the next slide, I will give a quick overview of the software maintenance line and where these increases came from. So with Munis, our financial software, we added a new product called Tyler Content Manager. It's an electronic filing system, a document storage system. It allows for scanning and attaching of invoices, other documents. It basically adds some context to our records. A purchase order record will now have an invoice attached to it at the end. The whole transaction can be seen with records attached all the way through. Certainly helps with remote work, which is something we've been trying to do over the past year for obvious reasons. And the big change with the miscellaneous amount is there is a software package that the town clerk is looking into. And we'd hope to move that money into that once she decides exactly which way she wants to go with that. We did have a couple of other increases. OpenGov for online permitting increased fairly significantly. It's actually a larger number than it should be. I just, in FY21, mistakenly used the FY20 number, so it looks a little lower than it should. The FY21 actual cost is somewhere in between the number that you see on the screen, the 25.5 and the 32.55. So it's more like a 6% increase instead of that looks like almost a 15 or 16% increase. Nothing else major here. If we could move to the next slide, I believe it's the last slide I have. It just outlines that hardware lease line, talking about how we move those monies to central purchasing and move into that managed print service. It takes a little load off of the technology team, as we don't have to actually support printers. They just have a sticker on them. Departments can call that number. The service people come that day or the next day, and they also ship toner as needed based on a system that they use to track every printer and copier in the town. So it's been a pretty good change. Took a little getting used to for most of the people around town, but now that it's been in place for a little while, I think everybody likes it. So, and the town manager mentioned our staffing changes. It was really just a realignment to better reflect the time that I was spending. I really was spending more like 70% of my time on the school side, just due to the volume of work over there. So that's all I had on the town technology budget for this evening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Peter.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not muted, am I? Okay. Thank you both. There was a lot of stuff in across those presentations. I have questions for both the town manager and the IT director. For the town manager, can you explain a little more color what you're thinking of doing here in terms of the capital plan? You had alluded last week that, and I think you did a little bit this week around not using that $211,000 and utilizing some of that unexpended capital and savings from the fuel tank project. But it sounded like tonight, like we still really don't know what the specifics are in terms of where exactly all of the funds are going to come from and what's available. Is that a fair description? Like wait till next week, I guess is the.
Yes.
Okay.
The numbers we're waiting for the money articles that are on the draft warrant already, such as the TCP article. There's two other, we know the APR number that's in the warrant article. So that I'd be recommending that come out of free cash as well. I mentioned it last week and again this week about the 211,000. My original recommendation was to take that out of the special purpose stabilization fund. I think we're in a position that we can keep those funds where they are and take it instead, increase the raise and appropriate number for the capital plan by that amount instead, because we have the ability to do that. And that will leave those funds in, like I think you yourself had mentioned, the number of projects the large capital projects that we have in the coming years for the fire apparatus and the rescue truck alone is around 1.5 million. So leaving those funds in there would benefit the town in the long run, where we have the ability right now to not use them.
Okay. Regarding the IT program. Mr. Maladrinos, you and I met in person about a year and a half ago. And I had asked you a series of questions in particular about security. And I had noted the value of the data and the information technology infrastructure that we have, and the spate of ransomware attacks that had been occurring at the time on municipalities. And I can tell you that, and I haven't done the exact research, but I've paid pretty close attention because that is the field that I live in. Over the course of the last year and a half, those rates have probably tripled or quadrupled, or perhaps even more than that, in terms of the ransomware attacks that are occurring on municipalities, the actual ransoms that they're drawing from municipalities, and the disruption that is ensuing, particularly when these infrastructures are disabled. My intent is not to question your ability or the ability of anybody on your staff or anybody's expertise, but I'm wondering if you could, outline, number one, should we be confident that our vulnerabilities relative to these potential attacks are managed?
I mean, it's a matter of risk management, obviously. What's our risk appetite? And obviously, it's very low in our situation. We don't have business to protect, but we have certainly private data, and the value of that data is extremely high. We do have an insurance policy that's offered by MIA, the Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Association. It's provided to towns free of charge, funded by the state. It has quite a high level of, I'm looking at the coverage levels right now. Our schedule of coverages, we do have an annual $1 million limit annually, or per claim, either one. So we are insured against those type of attacks. It covers, covers security and privacy liability. It covers multimedia liability, which is in public meetings like this. If something was said that was untrue and someone decided to sue because of it, we would be covered under that. It covers PCI DSS, which is payment card industry, which is if there was any type of fraud or hacking that went into, or that we were not in compliance with PCI DSS, if something came because of that, we're not required to be in compliance with that. Our payment card processing is done by outside vendors, but we are covered by that just in case. We're covered for breach events. We're covered for network asset protection, which includes data recovery. It includes a non-physical business interruption, like a DDoS attack or something like that. Someone attempting to just take our networks down. It also covers cyber extortion, which is something you just mentioned. Those are each covered for $250,000 for each claim. That's actually quite a bit higher than the numbers we usually see for that kind of cyber extortion. It covers cyber crime. It covers dependent system failure. So if we lost systems due to some kind of a breach that weren't directly involved in the breach, those systems will be covered as well. I did spend some time before this job in information security as well. I did many vulnerability audits and things like that. I have a fairly high level of confidence in our security throughout the town, but I have been looking at the National Institute of Technology and Science and Technology, the NIST framework for security recently. There's a voluntary framework that you can apply and just sort of see where the gaps and things are. And we've started going down that road to get a matrix in place just to see where we can invest some time or a little bit of money to close gaps where possible. So it's something we definitely think about a lot because it's in the news. Weekly, you see some municipality getting shaken down by cyber criminals. And it's not just municipalities, it's every business at this point. So it's something we take very seriously.
So I appreciate you enumerating the insurance coverage, and I think that is important that we have that coverage. there's costs of liabilities, and there's second and third order costs of disruption that I would question how well they're covered if you consider the amount of disruption that could potentially be caused by such an attack. Do we retain any kind of incident response managed service or any kind of, break glass in case of event where we know that we can get back up in the event of an emergency?
We don't, but there are many companies that offer that type of service. I've been in contact with them several times. It's not something we pay for like a retainer basis, but from the companies I've spoken to, that kind of service is readily available. Obviously, the cost is fairly high, but the costs I don't think would exceed the numbers that I see in that insurance policy. Barring multiple breaches or multiple incidents within a year. It may exceed that number, but it would have to be $1 million is a pretty large amount of money, even for services and purchasing equipment and considering that kind of thing.
Well, one of the services that comes when you do engage in the retained service, which does guarantee that you get those services when you need them, is that there are some assessment services and sandbox services and those kinds of things that can help you and gain some insights if you're following something like the NIST CSF that you mentioned a little bit earlier. And I think it's great, by the way, that you're adopting that framework and following it. That being said, to my knowledge, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you are not under any compliance obligation under the state beyond, PCI types of federal regulations. You're not under any compliance obligation. You're not audited. There's no third party looking at what we're doing from a security standpoint, is there?
That's correct. No.
So, I would publicly recommend that we look into doing something like that, and in short order, if at all possible. I think it would be short money, well spent. Again, it's not to question you or anybody. It's just a second, third set of expert eyes in a situation like this. I think is money extremely well spent. And again, I think that the NIST CSF is a great place to start. Unfortunately, sometimes it leaves out a lot of the specificity that needs to be considered when you're entertaining certain services that may or may not be covered with a great deal of specificity in the framework. One last question, and I thank you for your patient answers to my questions. Do you feel that you've gone through an incredible year? I mean, when I think of what you've gone through in the school department in particular, and what you've fielded, it's mind-boggling. And I know that you've had people like me nipping at your heels about how can we get ahead of things like video streaming and those kinds of issues. It's been an unprecedented and hopefully not a repeated year. But that being considered, we don't know what's to come. We don't know what's to come with hybrid and what enrollment's going to be and what the needs are going to be from the town. And if there's resurgences and we go back to live meetings and those kinds of things. Do you feel that you are staffed sufficiently to deal with the possibilities on the order of magnitude that you've had to deal with over the course of the last year?
I would say on the town side, yes. On the school side, we could certainly use a little bit of extra help here and there, but that is actually going to be hopefully covered with some funding for some part-time or ad hoc work that we might need when we do big deployments or things like that. That's really where we kind of get hung up is over the summer, we do huge deployments. We pull lots of one-to-one devices back, get them ready for the next year, those kind of things, where we have large amounts of labor over a short period of time. If we could supplement that with some ad hoc work, that would be great. On the town side, I think we are sufficiently staffed. That realignment, I think, reflected that. We now have a full-time network admin on the town side, and with 0.3 of my time, I can certainly manage the administrative functions and fill in where our network admin, Dan, needs help. So,
thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, so a few questions. So earlier in the budget, you talked about the admin support for boards and commissions, doing minutes. I think that's a great add. But I guess on the IT side of that, do we think that we can get to some level of consistency across all our boards and commissions for how information is managed, propagated, and even available to the public? Like I even bringing it back to the PAC discussion. If you're watching it on Channel 8, you can't read anything that's being displayed. The quality is just so low. But I almost feel that any document that the board has in front of them should be freely available to anyone in the public. So I feel like a good, and we talked about this earlier in the year, a good share kind of environment, not SharePoint kind of environment, or a consistent approach for the town to use for document management and coordination would be good. Is that something we could build into this next budget, or at least look at for the following budget? But at some point, put that on our to-do list.
I can certainly speak with Steve about how we could implement that. As far as Steve is better equipped to answer this, but capacity on our website, if you're looking, are you looking for that type of sharing with the public?
Perhaps, but I mean, even just, kind of these SharePoint or off of the website, so that exactly what we have in our, for our case, our OneDrive, or what you have in Google Drives and other boards, that same material should just be available, unless it's covered under the exemptions. It should be available to the public as well. If the select board's looking at a document during the meeting and commenting on it, I should have access to it on my side. And same thing for anything we shared during these meetings. Anyone in the public should have access to those documents in real time. It helps you to follow along at home. But even just amongst the board, the ability to post minutes into one location and not email it and get into revision, control nightmares, as well as have the proper protections in place so that you're not committing maybe open meeting violations by editing documents and, that sort of thing. So I just think it kind of goes hand in hand with the minutes, admin support for that. It drives consistency to the process, openness to government. So I'd like to see it. And I know, Steve and I talked about it earlier in the year, and throughout the year, we've tried to implement it on this board.
Yeah,
And I don't know what the cost would be for that. Yeah, and if it could be covered in the budget or some other way.
that's something we can explore.
Yeah.
Okay. So then on the munis, on the am I to understand that that's kind of a soft copy storage of material? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. And are we looking at like bringing historical documents into that system? And I guess the ultimate question to this is: there a means by which we can reduce our physical storage footprint? Even watching the TC Passios redesign committee, it was, there was quite a bit of storage that is needed in physical form.
I think that's probably a better question for the finance director, to be honest. I believe we're planning to bring in some historical records. I don't know how much of our requirement for physical storage that's going to mitigate. I think Karen would be better able to speak on that.
I
And
think
so
we
she will, yes.
still have to keep the paper. We would still have to keep the actual, the process in which we're looking to go to is to have the ability to scan invoices into the system and retrieve them electronically if you ever have to look back. But unless something changes on the state level, we would still have to retain those physical records for as long as the state says we're required to. So, I mean, those would be, the records retention laws would have to be changed on the state level in order to allow us to eliminate the physical space that we're currently saying that we need for storage of those records.
So the state says you can't satisfy that via electronic storage?
Well, they haven't yet, and each time you want to get rid of anything, you have to ask for their permission to do so. So to the best of my knowledge, they haven't, unless Heather knows something that I don't, but I don't think that has changed.
Is there a timeline on that?
There's timelines. It depends on what the document is, and each department has a different retention schedule for things that they have to keep. Some of the records, like a lot of the payroll records, they consider permanent records, and you can't throw them away. Now, whether or not they say, you would like to think, and I would hope that they would say that if you store the records electronically, you can get rid of the paper document. But I mean, as far as older records, we would have to hire somebody to do that, and I have no idea what the cost would be. But if we did find out that, you know, what we were doing with the new software would allow us to get rid of those paper documents, we certainly would do that.
Okay. With the experiment that is COVID work from home, do you anticipate that any town positions would go to permanent remote work environment, thus reducing the physical footprint of the office space?
I don't anticipate that. We've been back, employees have been back in the offices since June. Yeah, I don't anticipate that happening with any positions.
Is the issue with that, that there's too much of a customer service portion of the positions?
Right, a lot of what we do, a lot of our offices, there's a huge customer service component. And physical documents that they need to retrieve and access on a continual basis that need to be on location.
Okay. And then the final one, and I don't know if we talk about it now or when we go over the articles, but the Article W, where, you know, there's the anticipation of asking for additional funds to allow for the TC Passios Design Committee to look at the cost for a replace. Do you have an idea of what kind of money you'll be looking at for that?
No, I think the TCP Building Design Committee will be discussing that maybe at their next meeting. So I hope to have that, you know, a number shortly.
All right. When's the next meeting?
It is Wednesday, the 17th.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Which is good, because the moneyed articles come up again on March 18th. Is really the night that we're really gonna get into those a little bit more in depth, so. Are you set, Chris, or I'm sorry, did you have more?
Yeah, no, those were the notes I took.
Okay, Evan?
Just a real quick question for Heather. On your last slide with the additional capital requests that you're throwing out there, I noticed that there's the replacement vehicle for the K9 Cruiser for the police department. Has heard correctly from Chief Gamble's presentation that they were planning to push that off just because they thought they could get maintenance to continue working the vehicle for at least another year or two. Is that changed? And if so, is there a reason why, or is that something that could be appropriated for some other project?
That has not changed. They do think they can get more life out of that vehicle. And that's why it's prioritized lower on the list of projects.
Is this second list then an attempt to try to add additional capital request, or is it just, so it would end up potentially being on that list, or is it something that should fall off of it?
Depending on what the available resources are, once we get finalized numbers for our unexpended capital that we can apply towards the fiscal 22 capital plan, we would go down the list of projects. What's next.
Okay. Okay. So it's just there because it was number 18 in line or 16 in line. So therefore it fell onto the list. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dave Passios.
Just trying to make sure everything's on. I keep switching things around. Question to Heather, if I may. Can you give me a rundown on the responsibility of the Board of Assessors or the Assessor's Office to update property information as it's available when you go on to GIS maps? I know the land use director told us when he was with us that the maps themselves, the base maps, that's a fairly expensive upgrade to get that updated. I was complaining that the old high school is still on the map. I understand that part, but I go deeper into the property cards and other information that's supposed to be there. And more every year, there's outdated information and has not been updated. I mean, 3 owners worth of property change, and it still lists the back 3 ownerships. Makes it really difficult to search properties and end up having to go to the Register of Deeds website to try to sort anything out as to who actually owns a piece of property, and follow the chain. So I'm wondering if, the further we follow behind, I'm assuming that at some point, if the town decides to get that up to date, it's going to be an expensive project.
There's 2 parts that I can contribute to what I am aware of related to that. So one piece is Cartographics is the mapping company. So the principal assessor has notified them about parcels that, particularly ones that have been transferred from town to private ownership, that those records are incorrect. So those should be updated shortly, but all the, just the property owner information, the part of the conversion from the old CAMA system to Vision is going to ultimately resolve a lot of those incorrect maps and information on those documents. So right now, the principal assessor is tediously going through each of the 5,079 parcels, I think, to validate that it's the correct information and maps and everything associated.
Okay, so I'm guessing you don't have a time frame on any of the steps involved in that yet?
So she has to have all the valuation information updated no later than August is when she would submit that.
Okay, so that would include ownership and changes to the cards and everything. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
That's all I had.
Yeah, I will say it's hit or miss because some of them are definitely updated, certainly to within the last year. So
That's what seems to be really strange. Some are up to date, and then others they go 3, 4, 5 years back.
That's what I was going to for my personal anecdote. We bought our house in March of last year, and it was updated by July. So you just have to live in the right street, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Or hit the right day.
Exactly.
Okay. Any other questions for Steve or Heather? None at this time. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm going to assume that this means that I take the info technology off of the presentation list for next week. I leave it on?
I think we're leaving it on for, unless Steve was there for the school side IT for next week, but if
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'll just include, okay.
if he answered all your questions, then we'd have
No.
more time on other topics, I guess.
I'm sufficiently satisfied with tonight's discussion. I don't necessarily see a need to include a prolonged discussion about IT in the schools.
Okay. If anybody else has, I know that there's not, unless there was going to be something that needed to be discussed separately in terms of information technology that Mike Cassidy or Dr. Burnham wouldn't be able to respond to, then I guess I'll leave it up to them. But in the meantime, I'll leave it public schools on the list and take info technology off as a separate item. And let that be part of the public schools presentation.
If that's the case, can I ask just one more question then of IT?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I was planning to ask this next week, but just at the off chance that it's supposed to be answered by the school department side. Is there anything that's happening with the massive delay that was set upon you guys when there was the ordering of all the Chromebooks and whatnot? Is there anything that's sort of planned for, I don't know, recovering some of the money that was spent to get those? Because I know they just kept on pushing it back and back and back further and further. And I don't know. It's a tough situation, a tough spot to be in. I just wasn't sure whether that was the IT department or whether that was the school department that was kind of handling the outcome of that.
So I will say I will most likely be at the meeting next week regardless. Full budget presentation for the schools. I think the superintendent wants us all to be there, and I'm happy to be there and answer questions. We did receive all the Chromebooks that were delayed for months and months and months. The funding was provided by the CARES Act for all those Chromebooks, so it wasn't a huge hit to the town. I know that the Association of Superintendents possibly was looking to put some pressure on, especially HP. They were one of the big offenders in this, promising stock to vendors and things like that that they didn't have and they knew they weren't going to have. So that was the upshot of the whole thing. I believe there may be some legal action pending. I don't know for sure, but it's something that I've talked about with the superintendent. I know she's talked about with other superintendents as well.
Okay, thank you.
Dave?
Yeah, one last question for Heather. Will you have the information that was requested by this committee available or present that information next Thursday also?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, just double checking on that. Do we need a separate agenda item for that, Terry?
Well, let me ask you guys, was that something you wanted to discuss as a separate issue or was it as it related to other parts of the budget?
It doesn't hurt to just add it so that if we do discuss it, we're covered.
Okay.
Hopefully we'll have schools as well. We still haven't received that from Mr. Cassidy, even though he announced on last meeting that he had it all prepared. I'm wondering why he's holding it.
He could be holding it to send over with all the rest of the school stuff next week.
Are we going to get the school material 48 hours in advance?
They're presenting their budget to the school committee the night before.
Yeah, we should have that. The other information I hope we have before the night before. Especially since he has it.
I'm sorry,
Heather, I cut you off. He promised that 2 weeks ago in the meeting.
Right. I will follow up with an email if that is okay with the committee.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I will put that on the agenda.
Thank you.
I just don't know what I'm going to call it. What will I call it on the agenda? Salary information, or was that?
Personnel and salary.
Yeah.
Okay, personnel and salary. Okay, thank you. Draft warrant articles. I leave it on there. I don't know if you wanted to talk about any of the newer articles that were showing up, just to stay on top of those, or certainly at least just I know planning is doing parking. I could see that from the draft. I don't want to talk about parking.
They did two. They have two articles, actually. We received a citizens petition today.
That was the hunting one, or is that a different one?
Yes, that's the firearms related to conservation. And the APR article, that's new since last meeting.
Is that looking for town money for the agricultural?
It's looking for a 10% match from the town, which is approximately a little over 66,000.
I think that's something that we may not have time to give that a proper hearing prior to the public hearing. But I think that that's a topic that deserves probably some good conversation.
We have invited Michelle Padula, she from MDAR, to come to the select board's meeting on Tuesday. And we'll also be having in the chairman of the cemetery commission to talk about their article. The land use director will be there to talk about the planning board articles if you're interested in those, and the personnel committee regarding their article.
So Tuesday night is going to be a hot night at the select board.
So
Can you talk just a minute on that Pierce? Just give a quick overview of what.
Want me to pull it up? What do you know?
Please.
Which what letter it is?
Towards the end. Let me see. You can probably get to it faster than I can right now.
Well, I'm going backwards here, but
It's Z.
Z. All right, I got it.
We're up to double E.
So much for sticking to like P and Q, right?
Yeah.
Chris, did you have particular questions that you wanted to raise with this, or did you just want some information on this, or you wanted to share information on this?
No, just can you give like the 1 minute on what's trying to be accomplished here?
So this, essentially, this program tries to preserve property that could be potentially developed. So the property owners work with Mass Department of Agricultural Resources. They do a number of analysis on this, but they do market value, and that's what's offered to the property owner. So that would keep that property in perpetually as an APR piece of land.
Is this being put forward by the Agricultural Commission as well? Are they?
No, this was, so we haven't got their official position. I'm pretty positive they would be in favor of it. But this was put on the warrant. We received the article from Michelle Padula a week ago. So it was added by the select board on Tuesday night to make sure it made it onto the warrant.
So the homeowner, the owners of the land still retain ownership of the land, is that?
Yes.
And then is there any public access to the land, or like how does any of that work?
No, it's not public access. It just retains that restriction on that property, so it can never be developed.
Okay, but it can be sold, just not, and then once it's sold, it has to remain as a tree farm or
I think
some
it
kind
would
of agri?
follow the deed. That's a good question though, that we can ask Michelle on Tuesday.
Okay, and it's not one of these like, I always forget if it's 51A or 61, it's not one of those tax property, right?
Already, I believe.
It already is.
Yeah, that's already chapter land.
Yes, that was a question I did ask our assessor. So it's already in chapter. So she gave me a breakdown of the current assessments for each. There's 3 parcels in all. One parcel right now is $145.47 for year 2021. One is $40.80, and one is $1,367.75. So there would be a minimal change in valuations.
And have we done these before? Is there any other towns and properties in town?
Yes, the Lonnie property. That was Lonnie Orchard property. That was it was done in 2016, I believe.
Okay.
Heather, the question of perpetuity is being researched, correct on that?
Yes. Yeah.
So that came up at the Board of Selectmen's meeting.
Yes.
Okay. The other question I'd have is, does it limit the property owners on what they can do? I know it says agricultural use, but I'm more concerned about earth material removal and things like that. I'm just wondering if it limits that going forward.
I'll make a note and make sure these questions are all raised Tuesday.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, my question would be, could you put a Bright Farms on that property and put in, 500,000 square foot greenhouses on that property and keep it in agricultural use? And is that really our intent in terms of preserving the agricultural nature of our town?
Okay, so, well, actually, see, now I don't understand this at all. So I thought I did when I read it. So basically, this ownership is maintained by the Pierces after this transaction is done. Is that correct?
Yes.
So there's no transfer of ownership. All that happens is there's now a restriction on the title that the land can't be used for anything other than agriculture if it's sold.
It can't, be developed into a major housing development with those impacts on the town. Right.
It's traditionally stated as just purchasing the development rights, but I don't know what the limitations are or what the definition of development is under those circumstances.
One final question that I've had is, if it's in chapter, do we have any rights to take it out of chapter? Because the benefits of it being in chapter are effectively lost. We're not gonna purchase the property to keep it from being developed if we've already purchased a covenant on the property.
Right.
Well, we could purchase it for another use. That's agriculture of nature.
Not if there's an agricultural preservation covenant on the property. Like,
we could set up like community gardens in the place.
The state goes and spends $665,000 to put an agricultural preservation on that property. It's never going to be developed for housing.
Yeah,
No,
no.
I'm with you on that, but we could purchase it and then do something like, these give an acre of lot to, small farmers to get going.
Oh, yeah. Sure, yeah. I mean, I suppose we could.
Who initiated this? How is this initiated? Do you know?
Property owners work with the Department of Agricultural Resources.
Okay. Can I do this at my house?
Yeah.
Usually initiated by the property owner.
Okay.
If you go, you just have to run a few rows of corn or something in the backyard.
And you gotta have the right soils.
And it currently, is it currently operating as a farm?
Yeah, it's Pierce's Tree Farm. We buy Christmas trees.
Yeah, okay.
That property's been reshaped and is primed now for agricultural production, which I
Oh,
think
okay,
we'll
cool.
see.
Okay,
Which we'll see in the near future, I believe.
sweet.
Yeah, so we may need to get some like APR specialist kind of in front of us to present the benefits or.
Well, I think
That's
if they go to the selectmen's meeting, that might be sufficient. These questions get answered, right?
I'll be
Do
there.
they have an APR specialist coming to?
She's
yeah?
coming, or she's been invited.
Michelle
Cool.
Patella.
Oh, that's what she does?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
All right. Any other new warrant articles that we wanted to take a look at then? No? Okay. We'll have plenty of time next week. So with that then, we don't have minutes to vote on this week, is that correct? Thank you.
Well, we going to talk about Peter's letter?
I haven't got there yet. Oh, did I go right over it?
Yep.
Oh, I did. I went right over it. Okay, let's talk about Peter's letter. I'm thinking I'm getting to it, but I'm not.
He's already
Not retired yet, Terry.
So I did email a draft of the letter to you all today. I apologize. I intended to do so last week and I forgot. And then over the course of the week, I got an idea or two to add to it. The schedule that Heather had outlined last week is the draft is presented to you tonight. We review and edit over the course of the next meeting or so, and then we finalize for the ideally, I guess, the March 25th meeting, if I remember correctly. What is the pleasure of the board? Should we read through it tonight? I'd be happy to read it. Or do you want to sit on it and comment through email or what?
Well, we could at this point, if, again, it could be a question of whether we did, let me first ask, how many people have read it already?
Well, I took a cut through it, but.
I got through about 2/3 and then I was going to be late for the meeting.
Because I think we could post it up, but I don't know if people currently have thoughts, then there's not a problem with introducing those thoughts tonight. Or you can go ahead and just send them to Peter. You could do a read through, but I'm not sure that it's appropriate at this time. Just in terms of, not that it's not appropriate, but
I get what you're trying to say, Terry. It's not in a form that it's ready for public forum.
Well, that, and I know that there's a couple of X's here, and I know that, I guess the question is whether or not, and what people need to think in terms of is, I mean, I was quite happy with it when I read it in terms of, I think the gist of it for me was very good. But I think certainly some of the numbers have to be filled in. And I think what you folks need to think in terms of is when this letter goes into the warrant, it has all of our names under it. So if there's something that you would like either incorporated into it, something that maybe Peter didn't think about that was part of the discussions that we've had all year long, or going into the budget process that you would like to be highlighted, then certainly Peter is the one that needs to hear that. And if and then we could probably do the read through. All right, well, that was just very distracting, so sorry.
What did I miss?
Well, no, Heather just sent a message to everybody and it popped up in the middle of everybody's pictures. So, But I think that basically if people have stuff that they'd like to mention tonight, I think that's appropriate. If anybody has any immediate feedback they want to share, I think that would be fine. And I think we do a full read next week.
Okay, so let me propose that we do a full read next week. And I will invite any written comments back before then. And we can postpone the deliberation and still stay within the limits of open meeting law.
So all the numbers, will we have those in time for the warrant?
So yes. So what we've done in the past is we've kept the XXX because a lot of these numbers are still fluid. By the way, we could find that we need to add stuff to this because of our because of stuff that we found tonight or next week or whatever. This is very draft, obviously. But the way we did it last year, and I don't know if there was precedent to that, was that Michelle circulated the letter with just XXX. If you really want to know the number, you can go back and find it if you can find it. And then I'll work with Heather to make sure that we've got the right numbers at the end, because a lot of them are frankly still a little fluid.
Yeah, and the ones
that
that
was
we
my
don't.
question. Is there any of these numbers that we do not anticipate having in time, for the 25th?
Oh, well, that
For the
one's.
25th, I would say probably not, because our intent is to vote on recommending a budget on the 25th. So
If there's something that we don't have a number for that we can't make a recommendation on, I think we can highlight that in the, basically we would just change
edit it out.
everything around that and say that, like at this time, we don't have sufficient information to make a recommendation around something.
I can't think of anything in the letter right now that we would not have in pretty solid form by the 25th, because we expect to vote on a budget recommendation on the 25th. All of that information we should have.
Heather, when's the cutoff date for printing the warrant, though? That's the key to this whole thing. The letter's got to be ready when it goes out to print.
Oh yeah, the letter will be ready. It has to be ready within a couple days of the 25th. So, which is why it's done now with some of those holes in it, and why we need to identify now what it is that we might want to highlight or not. Was there anything in particular, Chris, that caught your eye?
No, I'm just
I mean, the CARES Act funding, I mean, basically, we should have some sense of what's been being spent there and what that, and if we don't have an exact number on something like that, which isn't really part of the budget, then, I think basically stating that we used a lot of, we used an estimated amount of, or we anticipate, using this much or something like that. But any of the budget items, the town budget items, we would have the numbers, I would think.
Okay.
And if we don't, then we just don't make a recommendation and we don't incorporate that into, or we identify that in the letter that we don't have a recommendation related to a certain item. But I can't think, I can't think of a time that we haven't had a number, so. Any other questions on the process or anything that people might want to? Okay, so again, give it a read and make any recommendations to Peter. And that would be great.
Terry, I was just looking at the printed schedule. I forgot I have it up here. That's got to get into the select board office by the 30th.
Right,
So,
yeah.
So we got plenty of time.
Well, I mean, we have the 25th. We have the
Yeah.
25th.
Yeah, we have to make sure everything is plugged in. So that we have basically anything that we've been discussing to this point. And if there's anything in there that you disagree with in terms of Peter's view of it, we need to have a discussion about that as well. So it would be good to highlight that coming into next week.
And by the way, that did happen last year. Michelle and I went around the horn a few times on some issues and we worked it out. So.
All right, then moving on. Do we have any committee or department reports?
TC Passio's redesign committee met with the Board of Selectmen on Tuesday. We brought forward 3 or 4 specific topics to talk about that evening. Had some good back and forth with the board. One of our concerns was that when we do finally go to town meeting, with a proposal or multiple proposals, that the conversation, or at least the questions, will again be asked about the buildings that would be potentially vacated. And we made it clear to the Board of Selectmen that we were not asking to become the reuse committee or expand our scope to being a reuse committee, but just wanted to make sure that both boards were on the same page, as that will be an issue that comes along with any proposals that are brought forward. The other major item was our request to consider expanding our scope just a small bit to allow us to continue forward with the proposal we've been working on, to fine tune that one and look at a comparison proposal with a tear down and replacement with new building, and some funding for additional engineering. And that was agreed to, and that's why the 2 articles were added to the warrant Tuesday night. And we will be meeting, as we said earlier, on the 17th. As Heather said, I'm pretty sure we'll have it pretty well pinned down by the end of that meeting as to what that dollar amount's going to be. And then we'll be working on another update report at town meeting. That's it.
Dave, is there a reason?
Sorry, go ahead, Evan.
No, it's all right. Okay. Dave, why is it that it's split out into 2 warrants? Why do we need this to have a warrant to say whether or not we're going to hear the report, and then have a warrant to say whether or not we're going to take that report and then use that report or appropriate that what they have in that report? Why not just combine?
The first one is to have town meeting to allow us to give the report, which is required.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah. And then the second one is to expand the scope. Actually, all it does is it adds 2 words to the wording of the article, which allows us to look at the original article gave us a scope of looking at the building itself. It said nothing about the land. So that wouldn't really allow us to go to that next step as to a tear down and a rebuild on the land. So that's what that's doing. And then there will be a dollar amount plugged into that.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
How much has been spent on the redesign effort today?
Heather, I forget the number.
265,000.
All right. So I guess my own personal opinion on this one is that I resonated with the logic that Selectman Adams laid out, because I think if this building is not going to be reused and we're going to tear it down, it is not where I would put town hall. So although I understand that if we're close to the goal line and you say 265, if you update it to 275, maybe 285, we can get a first order cost of what that notional project would be. I'd be in support of this. But I did like the concept of, what would just the building, based on the requirements that we laid out, cost if it were here or anywhere for that matter. So I don't really, to me, the better spot for this is across the street at the, where the old primary school is. At least knowing that we have this Turkey Hill unknown, And potentially that's where this site needs to go. Potentially TCP needs to be a temporary school while that building is going on. So I do think you should think again about the language and giving yourself the flexibility to come up with an estimate with very little dollars on that land or across the street. I think that's
Yeah,
a
but
better.
our charge, I don't want to get into this too much deeper because this is not an agenda item. So we really shouldn't be debating it back and forth. But the committee's direction as a committee was the request we gave to the Board of Selectmen. I think I'll leave it at that this evening. I understand your points.
Yeah, so I don't agree with that at all. Your committee was redesign. It wasn't to tear down and rebuild. And I think spending any more than $10,000 on this project at this point is becoming a waste of our money.
Yeah, I gotta make one more comment, and I made it in the meeting that we were talking about this a few weeks ago. And that is that you need to spend the money to do what's necessary to get to a completed proposal. And a few more $1,000 to bring 2 proposals to town meeting, give the voters a choice. If they vote them both down, okay, then we redirect this whole process. But until such time as we bring those proposals, and we need that comparative proposal, because the town may very well support the renovation. Maybe you don't, but there are an awful lot of people out there that do support it, even at $18 million. So you need to allow the,
I mean, reducing the
no,
number
it's down to 18. I'm going to
yeah,
stop
by
now.
including the risk. So
No.
I think that, again, I'm going to stand by my statement that I think it's very poor at this point to now to add any more than a couple thousand, 10,000 at most to this project. Because we already know what the cost is. We have, they've cited the cost for municipal buildings. So, and I also agree that we would not build a 55,000 square foot building. We should put schools in with schools. We should put all the school wing in with the Turkey Hill. So,
You're not going to be able, well, as long as the town pays for it, because MSBA will not pay for that space.
Okay.
For those programs. Thank you.
Peter,
I have a comment on this, and I'll be very brief. I also sympathize with Selectman Adams and Chris's position on this. I do think that in my mind, the purpose of spending some nominal amount to get a swag at a tear down and replacement cost is just to know if it's way out of whack with a reasonable cost, right? It's like you're going to renovate your house or buy a new one. If you're going to fix up your car or buy a new one, it's the same kind of analysis. But the reality is exactly as you pointed out, Chris, and is the replacement wouldn't be a 1-for-1 replacement of the use of the current building. It wouldn't make sense to do that.
right.
So therein lies the problem, right? Is you want to know that you're not getting a bad deal, but at the same time, you know that you wouldn't buy a 1-for-1 replacement. So therein lies the challenge. But one other problem here that I see looming is if we put ourselves in a situation where we get to a point that is totally inconclusive, we've just bought ourselves another 2 years of trying to figure out how to do this at the old primary school or 635 Mass Ave or someplace else. And we're putting ourselves further and further behind a couple of 8 balls around town use and school use. So I'm concerned about that as well, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
well,
And just one final on this, my view on this is, we went out looking for a home and I said, I want waterfront property, 5,000 square foot home, 4-car garage, blah, blah, blah. What we should have done is I need to find what I can do for $10 million. and I need to find what I can do for $27 million or whatever on Turkey Hill. And I don't know if those are the right numbers, but I think we need to do a bit of a tops-down budget allocation, and especially if we're into a new design versus a refurb of a building. So I think that that's the more prudent financial position to make for all of these buildings that are looming ahead of us here.
Okay. I mean, obviously, like we'll have a better sense of what we're discussing in terms of that particular warrant article when we get to the moneyed articles next week. So we can probably have a more in-depth discussion then. But yeah, the question is going to come to what recommendation is the Finance Committee going to make on that article? And the question that we're weighing is, are we talking about, I mean, we're not at that point talking about saying that we support the notion of doing a rebuild right there. We are saying that we would support knowing what it would cost to do the rebuild, so that we can say, if we're going to do the rebuild, then no, let's go back and take a look at, we have $13 million to spend on a new building. Where do you want to put it and what do you want it to be in? So I basically, the buildings have been part of the warrant for, I think, every town meeting I've been part of since I've been on the Finance Committee. So it's feeling closer to the end of the discussion, but it's definitely not there. And I think that the point is good. I think that, yeah, I know a lot of people also would just like to open up the space after the TCP has outlived its life. And yeah, in the shorter term, with the whole notion of the other school changes that are going on, or the renovations, or what's going on with Turkey Hill. Yeah, it does open up a whole can of worms, but luckily we're just going to be making a recommendation on whether or not we want to spend that money and what we hope to accomplish with it, which is nice. I'm glad I'm not on the reuse committee, which existed for a couple of years, or on the TCP renovation committee, and all the work that they've been putting in this year. So any other warrant articles that we wanted to take a peek at? Okay, so
that was a
sorry?
committee report, believe it or not.
Although it would have been appropriate for warrant articles. It would have been fun.
Yeah, well, it was appropriate for warrant articles. So yeah, see, this is why I gotta go. I can't stay awake this late, people. All right, do we have any town manager, finance director reports? You got nothing, okay.
I'll just say no reports, but I'll just say that website is very informative.
Yes.
So there's a guidebook in there that I think will answer a lot of your questions. It talks about selling or transferring the land, uses, that type of process. I think what we need from Michelle Padula is the actual APR agreement, because I think that will restate the terms of which they can sell the property.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, by the way. I didn't mean to. I was only put off because I can't hold a thought.
You're welcome.
Any public comment from anybody on the committee?
Yeah, I just want to say a couple things. First of all, Terry, I was very disappointed to get your email, and I didn't respond because I was very disappointed to get your email. I'm going to be sad to see you go. You've been a really good source of information, a really good judge of what we should and shouldn't be doing along the way, and you've done a really good job at guiding this committee before my tenure, and certainly over the course of the last 2 years. And I personally want to thank you. Well, I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunity to do so over the next several meetings, but I wanted to take a minute to do that. And I also wanted to, I think Mr. McDonald made a really good point at the beginning of the meeting. Heather, you and your team have done a fantastic job, not just during the preparation of this budget. Obviously, we have plenty of points of disagreement, spirited disagreements, but this has been an incredibly challenging year for exactly a year. They declared a state of emergency 1 year ago today in Massachusetts. We saw it coming in the meeting prior to that, where we kind of said this might be our last time meeting together for a while. And it came to fruition. And I think you had a more positive outlook than I did, certainly at the time. And I think in the grand scheme of things, well, it probably went longer than we all anticipated. We're in a much better situation than I could have ever imagined. And I give you and your team all the credit, because we've been very well managed during this period of time. So thank you.
Thank you. And I think Lunenburg is extremely fortunate to have the staff that we do, department heads. They've demonstrated such a commitment to providing services all along. And our finance team, Karen, I think she dropped off the call, but yeah, I can't say enough positive things about Karen. She's phenomenal. And she is coming up on her, so everyone knows, her 38th year with the town. So,
Oh my God.
yeah. So.
Well, you're not going to make me feel bad about 9. That's it. And I did look it up, and it was 9. It was like I went back to the first email I got, and it was back when we didn't have Lunenburg Online addresses. So.
I think you get a pin at 10 years.
That's good to know.
I'll buy it for you.
You guys can just, go ahead. You go for it. I think that's fair. The other thing is that, like someday I'll retire from my real job, and then, like who knows, maybe I'll be, looking for vacant seats on the finance committee again. In the meantime, I'm sure that I'll probably be watching for as long as they're on Zoom. And like, and if something sounds just not right, I'm sure I'll pipe in.
Or if you won't, your mother will tell you about it.
Oh yeah, she'll tell me, yeah. For sure. Any other public comment? No other public comment. Next meeting, 3/18, we have the public school department, and then info technology related to the public schools, moneyed articles, and the information on personnel and salaries. On 3/25, we will have the public hearing for the town meeting warrant. And I think for next week, before we get to the moneyed article, if there's anybody that you want to hear from on any of the public hearing, if you want to just drop me a line, or actually you can drop Heather a line in terms of, is this person going to make themselves available for any of, I don't want to hear about hunting. I assume that discussion may happen or has happened at other meetings. Is it something that we would be required to do if somebody wanted to bring that up on the 25th?
It's
or can we focus on moneyed articles?
Out of scope.
If you want to discuss it on the 25th, is that what you asked?
I'm asking if we have to.
Do you feel it has a financial impact?
I don't.
I think so. Yeah.
But
Yeah, as a non-binding
that's
vote,
true, it is not binding.
then I don't think it does. Prohibiting the right to carry, not just hunt, but prohibiting the right to carry, I do think opens us up to litigation and Second Amendment right issues. So I would think that there is a potential fiscal impact for that.
Okay.
I thought that's why it was not put in the policies, land use policies, but we'll see how that goes going forward. Because I think you're right, Chris.
Yeah, I was actually surprised when I read it that they combined those two together as an and, because anytime you have that, you're like, well, why is the person voting yes or no? Is it because they don't support both of them? They don't support one of them? They support one, but motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so Chris made the motion to adjourn. Peter seconded. All in favor? Chris?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Evan?
Aye.
Heather?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
And I for myself. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.
Thank
Night,
you.
everybody.
Have a good night. Good night.